Get ready for a night filled with conspiracies, strange places, the paranormal, UFOs, legends, and myths from around the world. With your hosts, K-Town, Kel, and Karma on Mysterious Radio.
All right, so we are very happy that you are joining us for our show today. Karma, how you been doing?
Been doing good. Just ready to get this one going. I'm super excited about it.
Me as well. Mark is a good guy. Today we're going to be talking about the flat earth theory. And if you've never heard of that, I encourage you to visit his website, enclosedworld.com. There, he has a 12-part series that covers every aspect of the enclosed system we live in. And he talks about the space program, extreme weather expeditions, and all kinds of clues that will change how you see the world around you. So that's going to be a great show.
And I watched the clues, and it was really interesting when I first started, kind of getting into the researching and everything. So those are a really good place to start as well.
Yeah, it is. It is. And Mark is very intelligent. You can listen to these interviews and you can tell that. I mean, he's been on Coast to Coast. He's been on many, many, many radio shows. So he is very well on to something. We are very happy to have him on the show. But we want to thank you guys also for listening to the intro show. Even though it was 10 minutes long, we had over 50 hours of that show listened to in the first day. Very motivating. We want you to know that you can find our show on Spreaker. We will start doing live shows as well. Also, the show it's already on iTunes as well, right, Karma?
Yeah, I'm super happy about that. We got it in one day?
Yes, one day. Our website, we want to encourage you to go over to that. Listen to our shows from there. And of course, it's better to go there to find out more information about the guests that we're having on the show. We'll
announce our live shows in advance. And we're probably going to start with Pat Fitzhugh on October the 5th at 9 p.m. And that's Eastern, right?
Yes, it is. It is.
Okay.
And I'm sorry you're not going to be there for that one, Karma.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not going to be there for that one. I'll be away on business that week. But I'll be back. We're going to have a guest host that day. So.
Yes, and I will have a guest host. It's still going to be a live show, and it'll be a great show. We hope you guys will join us for that one. We have Tim Schwartz coming up on September the 20th, and he will talk about Admiral Byrd's secret journey beyond the poles, where he recorded journals of a flight he took as he was exploring the interior of Antarctica, and supposedly he flew over an area that was lush green forest. It was completely absent of ice and or snow, and there he says that he encountered some beings from another world. So it is one of the most fascinating journals I've ever read, and we are very happy to have Tim on the show.
Yeah, and Tim Schwartz is Indiana native and an Emmy award-winning television producer, videographer.
Yeah.
He's the author of a number of popular books, too, including The Lost Journals of Nikola Tesla, Beast from the Dark Side, and Real Ghosts, Restless Spirits, and Haunted Places.
Yeah, cool. So I can't wait to talk to him about some of those things. That's going to be great.
And you can find links to some of Tim's books on our website, and you can visit his website at conspiracyjournal.com.
And Tim is a fascinating guy. I mean, he's very he has a good spirit about him. He really does. We laughed quite a bit. Actually, my first 10 minutes with him, we were laughing like crazy. So he's a good guy. So that's going to be a great show, and we do look forward to that. I want to tell people that, as far as my interest in the show, I'll tell you why I've loved it so much. my experience with the paranormal, I know you don't know this, Karma, but I want to say that my experience with the paranormal came when I was about, I was probably about 12 years old. I was outside in the neighborhood. It was probably it was actually dark, to be honest with you. It's very dark. And me and another little boy in the neighborhood were outside talking, and we were standing by a neighbor's house. So it was, maybe like 3 houses up from mine. Now, the interesting part about this is when I was little, I used to there was a big hill like between my street and the street behind us. There was a big hill between both of those neighborhoods. Well, I used to play in that field when I was very young, and I would always see these bones, right? And I'd pick them up, and I didn't know. I'd pick them up, and I'd show my mom. She's like, "Put that down. That is a human bone." There would be bones, femur bones and hip bones. I'm not kidding you.
Wow.
This hill used to be a graveyard a long time ago, and so they apparently did not dig up the bodies. It was at a time where the coffins were actually wooden, and those collapse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Dirt comes in on them, and then I guess through erosion or whatever, some of these bones and things would come up, and I would find them all the time. So we essentially, played in a graveyard.
Wow.
They just apparently just removed the headstones. But I didn't know any better, and I had a good time back there. But myself, and there was a little boy in the neighborhood. We were outside talking, he and I, and I looked to the back of the hill, right? Me and him were looking back there, completely dark, nobody back there, and we both seen fire come up out of a hill.
Oh, wow.
I'm serious. Fire come out of that hill and went back down inside the hill. I've never seen anything like it. And
wow.
I looked at him and I said, "Did you see that?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "What did you see?" I said, "I seen fire." He said, "I did too." And we both ran home. And I came in the house and I told my mom, and she was like, "You seen what?" I said, I seen fire come up out of that hill. Nobody was there. Okay, nobody.
Wow.
And so when I hear about things happening to people and people seeing things, I don't always dismiss it because, it's hard for me to believe that I saw what I saw. But there are things in this world that we definitely do not know about and don't understand, and they are happening. And it's the reason why I love doing a show like this. I've always listened to Coast to Coast, and I have a few other favorite shows, but there are things, bottom line, that people see that others don't, but you shouldn't automatically dismiss it and say they didn't, because I know I've had my own experience. Have you had anything like that happen to you, Karma?
I've had quite a few weird experiences in my life. I've got a bunch of stories I could tell you.
Tell us one short and sweet story.
Let's just say I have, since I was a little girl, I've always, kind of run into things and seen things differently, I guess, than a lot of other people. So that's kind of what has sparked my intrigue in all of this, and just kind of, I always question and investigate everything because of what I've seen. We've had some personal hauntings.
Give me an example of something that happened to you.
Well, so the biggest experience that I had was, I think I was about 10. We had seen things and heard things, and even my parents had, but, they kind of dismissed it. We would hear like dishes in the cabinets and stuff moving that were, they were completely fine, put up, stacked, you could hear cups rattling, footsteps walking through the hallways from our living room area to my bedroom door.
Uh-huh.
And I used to keep my door cracked because I was really scared sleeping in the dark. So, I would watch my door and my door would move. I could see it moving, swinging whenever the footsteps, would come up to the door. I used to have those night terrors. They say that it's like, I guess, paralysis, like
Right.
the night paralysis, where you feel like something's pushing down on top of you.
Yes.
And you can't move. You can open your eyes and you see everything, but you can't move and you can't talk. So those seemed like it came around that time as well. But I remember we had been out somewhere and we came back, and everybody was kind of off and doing their own thing. And I was sitting in the room and I heard something knock on my bedroom window, which was right off from, well, it was my sister's room. I'm sorry, not my bedroom window, but her bedroom window. I was in there. So we were out from the front porch.
Right.
And I thought maybe it was somebody, just a friend or something, aggravating me. And I kept looking out the window and there was nothing there, nothing at all. And eventually, I think it was probably the third time I heard it, I pulled back the shade. We had shades back then.
Mm-hmm.
So I pulled back the shade and there's this dark figure with red fiery eyes just staring at me.
Wow.
And I couldn't move. It scared me so bad. And it was just hovering there. There was I looked at it for quite some time and it's like it just stared back at me. And then, of course, I went crying to my parents and, they thought maybe I had fallen asleep and I was halfway dreaming or something.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no explanation for it. And I've researched it ever since. It's pretty crazy stuff.
Wow. You know what? I had no idea that you went through that. You never told me that, but that's very interesting. And I know you had to be scared to death.
Oh, yeah. I would be 10 years old and not understanding, it was just weird stuff that would happen all the time.
And that's why I say, you can't dismiss someone else's experience. It's not right to do that, right? Because you wasn't there.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
I do believe in the paranormal completely. So I'm glad to do the show and try to shed some light on some of these things. And we definitely have a great show coming up for you right now. Growing up in South Whidbey Island, Washington, he started his career playing computer games professionally in Boulder, Colorado. From there, he spent the next 20 years troubleshooting and helping to train people in proprietary software. In 2014, he looked into what is no doubt the most ridiculous conspiracy ever, called Flat Earth Theory. And through extensive research, discovered it wasn't so laughable after all. In early 2015, he released a series of YouTube videos titled Flat Earth Clues, which delves into the possibility of our human civilization actually being inside a Truman Show-like enclosed system, and how it's been hidden from the public since 1956. Mark's hope is that one day, the 100th monkey scenario will occur. The majority of the population will start seeing things with new eyes, and the world will literally change. Welcome, Mark Sargent. All right, so we have Mark Sargent on the line. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me.
We are very, very impressed by your work and your research on the flat Earth. Yes. My spouse and I actually had this conversation when we were in Miami recently about we would just happen to be just looking at the horizon, right? And noticed that, you know, in my lifetime, I flew and I've been in the military and things like that. I have never seen the Earth curve ever. And I love how you've taken it upon yourself to, put this information out there basically for all of us to come to our own conclusions. So I wanted to ask you, Mark, what piqued your interest in the pursuit to prove or disprove that the Earth is round?
Well, I got into it, we've been doing this now for about 18 months, and there's a t-shirt out there, or it's going to be a t-shirt anyway, that I don't know who came up with it, but he said, the question was, how did you become a flat earther? And the answer is, because I tried to debunk flat Earth. Right. Everybody goes against it at first. And that's really was the same thing with me. I had been looking into conspiracies just in general, kind of like a little side hobby for, I don't know, 15, 20 years. And in the summer of 2014, I came across a German guy's video that was talking about flight routes in the Southern Hemisphere and how that they were all wrong. And they didn't make any sense. And then he offered the idea that's like, well, the only way they could actually make sense is if the Earth was flat, that it wasn't a globe, that it was, like a dinner plate. And I thought, okay, that's interesting, but it's obviously full of crap. There's no way that, like anybody, denial is always the first and most obvious response. And then I dug into it a little bit and looked at a video by Matt Boylan, otherwise known as the NASA channel, otherwise known as Math Powerland. Mm-hmm. And I looked in, and there was that creepy story that he told. I still consider it really the only good video he ever made, where his girlfriend sat him down, sober, mind you, sat him down on a couch, and he told the story about how he came out of Montreal as a college student. He was an artist, and he was hired as a freelance contractor for NASA. Mm-hmm. And that he had gone to, because he was a pretty dynamic guy, good looking, talented, creative, is invited to a high level kind of government NASA party out in the East Coast of the United States. And there was this, I don't know if you know the story, but it was interesting because somebody said, well, I'd heard a rumor that GPS doesn't work down in Antarctica. And another guy, said, oh, well, Frank, you should send a team of guys down there, confirm that. And then another guy chimed in, he goes, well, if you send your guys out that far, they're not coming back. Right. And of course, Matt bid on it, and he goes, why wouldn't they come back? And he goes, well, because GPS doesn't work down there. And, Matt, drinking wine and candles, drinking wine and the power had gone out apparently in this party, and it got pretty intimate. He goes, well, because it's flat. And nobody, Matt didn't understand. And so the guy took a piece of chalk and he started drawing on the tile floor, everything about the world in this giant circle. And Matt said when he was done, it looked like the UN flag. Mm-hmm. And it was really, really interesting. Anyway, the point was, I tried to debunk that story, and I tried to debunk it for 9 months. So all the way up until February of last year. And that's when I had this weird Jerry Maguire moment where I woke up in the middle of the night. I know exactly when it was. It was 3:30 in the morning on February 10th. And I had the whole thing in my head, the whole narrative. And I got up, took a shower, and just started typing. And I started building the flat Earth clues. And I built them one by one. So, I wrote the script, I did the narrative, I put the slideshow together, put it in Movie Maker, threw it up on YouTube. And it was basically my challenge to the internet to just say, okay, for whatever reason, I can't prove it's a globe anymore. And instead, I think it's flat. Somebody shoot me down. Somebody prove me wrong. Mm-hmm. And then I thought for sure some scientist, some intellectual, some pilot, somebody was going to say, well, you obviously were mistaken in this part of your research. Like anything, like you're taking a test and you're pretty sure you aced it, but you're not quite positive, not 100%. And then as the weeks went by, I realized that apparently I was onto something, because people started calling me. I started getting tons of emails. I started getting interviews, and then I started getting subject matter experts and here we are 18 months later, and it's gotten to the point, it's ridiculous the amount of exposure this thing has.
Right. And I've noticed that, and I wanted to ask specifics about in your research, what exactly did you find?
Well, when I was first looking at it, I started with the flights in the Southern Hemisphere. And I also looked at stuff, like Admiral Byrd, Richard Byrd, who was known for the Hollow Earth theory, and how most people don't know that he spent his entire life down in Antarctica, looking for something for 30 years. Geez, the details.
Tell us about Admiral Byrd, and I've read some things about him, and one thing I've read that is really fascinating to me is his journals. So tell us how he actually fits into this puzzle.
Well, it's interesting because I don't even know if I believe the original journals. I'm almost thinking now that the original journals about the North Pole may have been sort of a pseudo smokescreen, because everyone knows, because I was a Hollow Earth guy for a while. And if anyone knows anything about Hollow Earth, you know that there was this guy, Richard Byrd, who was an explorer before he was an admiral in the United States Navy. And he went to the North Pole. First guy to fly over the North Pole in a rickety plane in 1926. And his journal says that, that there was a land beyond the North Pole, or at least that's what we're led to believe, and that it was kind of turned into this journey to the center of the Earth type thing, where he, went inside the Earth, and there was, this hollow area, this giant vast area. There was, a whole other civilization living in there, which I thought was interesting, is an intriguing story. But then you'd think, if that's what he did discover, he would have spent his entire life on the North Pole. But that's the exact opposite of what happened. What most people don't know is he went down to the South Pole, and from 1928 all the way to 1956, remember he died in 1957, he was basically just flying missions. He flew his own planes.
Right. And
so he was flying missions down in Antarctica, looking for something. For the better part of 30 years. Now, what he was looking for, nobody had an idea at the time. But then he goes on television, and again, we're lucky to have it, this interview where he was on a show called the Longines Chronoscope, Longines, Chronoscope, kind of like a 60 Minutes of its day. This is back in 1954.
Right.
And he comes on and he says that, Antarctica is the most important place in the world. The thing is just made out of money. There's enough coal for the entire world. There's oil, there's minerals, there's uranium. And he was worried that there might even be a conflict out there. He goes, people are going to be down there for the rest of our civilization, and there's going to be nonstop missions going down there. And what had happened in 1954 was, I think he had knew, somebody obviously had the old maps of what this world really looked like. And he, Murphy's Law says, of course, the second you give up, because 1954, that's what it sounded like. He was going, all right, well, apparently we were wrong, so let's just make money. And then he goes down for one more mission. He talked about it in the interview. It was called Operation Deep Freeze in 1955 and runs till 1956. And whatever happened, whatever he found down there, and I still do think it was, for lack of a better word, the edge of the world. Not, like you could walk off the edge, but like a barrier. Everything changed at that point. Everyone left the ice very, very quickly. All the countries that were down there, and there were more than a few. There was, Argentina, New Zealand, Australia, Chile, United States, the Soviet Union, Great Britain, so on and so on. And they all left the ice very, very quickly. Something really spooked them. And then they started drawing up a treaty almost immediately. And it was, I think, finally ratified in 1959. And the treaty is still in effect this day. And again, most people don't know about it. And it basically says no corporation, no matter how much money you have, you cannot do any work down in Antarctica ever. It doesn't matter what country you're from. You'd think, oil companies, all you have to do is bribe the right amount of people. You can get it anywhere. I mean, in the United States, you could, an oil company could frack in your backyard, and it wouldn't take that much money to do it. But no one's allowed down there. And that treaty's not even up for debate until 2041. And then the Soviet Union and the United States started firing atomic weapons straight up from about that same time, from 1958 all the way until 1962.
Straight up in the air.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just straight up in the air.
Yeah, straight up for no apparent reason, doing high altitude explosions. And you can look this up, and they were firing pretty much nonstop until 1962. They stopped at the exact same day. And you say, oh, it was a treaty. And I go, no. That's exactly what they would do, because, it's man, not woman's instinct, pay attention to my audience here,
right?
Which is, if you did find a wall, a barrier, what's the first thing we would do as men? It's like, oh, we should be able to break through it. And, cannons weren't working apparently. So let's use the biggest thing we got, which was several megaton weapons. Around the same time, NASA was formed, right after those first two the first three high altitude shots with the atomic weapons. NASA was formed in 1958. 1959, right out, within a year, the Van Allen radiation belts were announced, saying that, oh yeah, by the way, don't ever go up there. It's super, super dangerous, super deadly radiation. No one can ever go through it. And yet less than 10 years later, the Apollo program is supposedly sending rockets through the Van Allen radiation belts, and they don't tell us what shielding they used. It has to be lead or gold. It's like those are very, very heavy, but they still, don't explain. No, nobody died. Nobody got radiation poisoning. Nobody got cancer. Round trips through these belts, can't explain it to save their lives. These weird moves. I mean, everything changed. People, we miss the obvious things because they're hidden so well. And the more I looked into it, it was like I got to the point where it's like, okay, let's say science was wrong. Let me kind of backtrack a little bit.
Okay.
Which is, let's say science made a mistake. And 500 years of whatever, because remember, up until you could get high enough to take the picture of what the Earth really looked like, what did you really know? The things that we can test on the ground with science, those are easy. We all know that fire burns, water is wet. You drop something to the floor, that's gravity. But how do you know the world is what you think it is? Because that's something you're told. That is something that you are you learn in a book. And then I started looking at, and that's why I really was leaning. Because remember, I didn't want to believe in flat Earth. It's a stupid theory. This is the last thing I wanted to do in my life. Right. So it's like, okay, how do I, it's like, okay, there's got to be a ton of evidence out there that says, well, the Earth is a globe. And so I start looking, and the more and more I looked at it, it was like, it just comes up empty. It's like you're looking at boxes, full, labeled, evidence of globe, and you just keep opening more and more of them. There's nothing in it. There's no, up until from 1972, when supposedly the first full disc picture of the Earth was taken, all the way until the summer of last year, there was only one picture ever released, and that was the Apollo 17 mission. There was no, up until July of last year, again, there was no picture of the Earth rotating on its axis, and even the ones we have now are extremely grainy and almost no frame rate. There is no footage even to this day of any astronaut turning with the camera running, turning around 180 degrees or further. And that's every space program from any country ever. It's never happened. You'd think someone on the moon, turn around with the camera running. Never, ever happened.
Absolutely. Right. Right.
It just gets worse and worse to the point I was going, okay, it's almost like they were going way out of their way not to show us what the world looked like. And you combine that with everything else I was looking at, I was going, okay, again, it wasn't like it got to the point where it's like, okay, I wasn't exactly trying to prove the Earth was flat, but 500 years of us telling everyone it was the globe, where does that come from? There's a great quote from George Orwell, the guy that wrote 1984. And he said he wrote this in 1946. He actually did an article on science and what science pushes out as the facts, even though there's not really, the evidence is a little thin. And one of them was, he did an article on the Earth, the shape of the Earth. And he goes, it's weird. You walk up to anybody in the street and you ask them, how do you know the Earth is a globe? And their first answer is almost always the same, which is, well, duh, we know. It's obvious. It's always been a globe. Mm-hmm. And then you try to push it. You try to, nudge them a little bit. It's like, yeah, but how do you really know? And then they start getting angry. Now, what was interesting about that article was it was written in 1946. Well, NASA wasn't even formed until 1958. So in 1946, how did everybody know the world was a globe? And that's because, and I know I'm rambling here, but I'll make this point.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
The point is, it's like, look, most of the time it's because of the easy reinforcement we got as children. we all know, because, you know, there's a globe in every classroom in every school in the world. And we all know this. We go to, you know, 6 years old, you're in first grade, globe in the classroom. It sits with you every day, and it's there until whenever you leave school. And by, you know, it doesn't take much, you know, a few years, but, you know, if you go 12 years through school, if you don't go to college, that's 12 years of you staring at the globe. And of course, that's it. You know, you're on a globe because that's what you're told. The line from the Truman Show, I still think resonates even more so now, which is, we believe the world that is presented to us, because children don't believe in lies. And then when we get older, you know, we don't believe that science lies. And anyway, that's where I am at the moment.
Mark, I was just curious, you know, as far as being someone who's relatively new to the research and studying, did you have any specific methods or instruments that you used in particular to come up with your conclusion and your findings?
When I first looked at it, I didn't want to go down, and of course that's changed now. When I first looked at it, I didn't use any math at all. It was just connecting the dots, which is creating, if you treated this like a court case, that's what I initially was trying to do, to make it so that everybody, and people I know call my stuff, you know, the Dummy's Guide to Flat Earth. And I don't mind, you know, that they say that, because I wanted this for even the lowest common denominator, people that just hate math. So what I initially tried to do was create reasonable doubt in the globe. Wasn't trying to prove Flat Earth, was just trying to say, okay, the globe is what science tells you, so with all this fun math, and we'll get to this in a second. Yeah. But I question, it's like, fine, you've got the math. I totally get that. But would you have anything else besides math? You know, it's like you can use sticks and shadows and trigonometry and geometry all you want, but the eventually, sooner or later, which is why I think they took so long in taking the picture, you've got to show people simple evidence, like a picture in a textbook. That being said, I didn't even do a single mathematical thing until somebody came to me later after the clues were made and said, look, you know, it appears that there's no curvature at all. Right. And that's where everyone's been kind of running with it lately, because it's so easy to test. And that is, if the curvature is, for those of your listeners out there, and I'm not going to try to freak you out with any weird math, it is 8 inches per mile squared, which is 8 inches times every mile times itself. So if you go out 1 mile, it's 1 times 1 times 8, which is 8 inches. 2 times 2 is 4, times 8 is 32 inches, 3 times 3 is 9, times 8 is 72 inches, and so on and so on. It's because it's going to get steeper as you keep going, because eventually, if it is a globe, it's going to curve completely vertical, and then you're just going to, you know, there's nowhere left you go. It goes off to infinity. So that's where we kind of dug in right away, because everybody that was showing me things, you know, like videos from far off distances and laser tests and everything you could think of visually, were showing things that should not be there. And by that I mean this. So if you take let's say a lighthouse across a body of water, a large body of water, it could be an ocean, an inlet, or whatever, and that lighthouse is 50 miles away. Well, 50 times 50 times 8 is pushing 1,700 feet of curvature, meaning it should be 1,700 feet on the other side of the hill, right? You know, depending on how high the lighthouse is. And to date, we have not found an object at all. And what's really changed in the last 5 years is camera technology. We've got zoom technology, which is far, far better than it used to be 15 years ago. So basically, you look with the naked eye, you look out at a certain body of water, and no, you cannot see the lighthouse. And you're saying, well, it's just like the boat. It's gone. It's on the other side of the curve. Thing is, you look through your camera and you crank the zoom on it, and now you can see the lighthouse. That's not possible. And then I started relying on what you're asking about, some of the scientific stuff. I started relying on the subject matter experts that were coming forward, like the United States military personnel and others. My favorite guy, though, was a guy from the United States Navy who is a missile instructor, who basically the missile systems that they use in the United States Navy, a lot of them are paint the target, which is they fire the missile, you take a beam radar, like it's kind of like a laser, and you go ship to ship. You point at the ship you want to hit, and that's it, you know, but it's a straight beam. It's nothing special. You're not bouncing it off of anything. And they were painting targets 50, 60 miles away. And that was, those were the unclassified distances he was even willing to share with me. And then the missile, homes in on that. Well, he goes, that's impossible because that ship doesn't even stand, in most cases, 40, 50 feet above the water, depending on what you're looking at. And we're painting these targets, and it should be, over 1,000, in some cases, 2,000 feet below the curvature. He goes, how are we painting the target? How are we hitting these things? He goes, it can't be possible. And we just ran into that over and over and over again. Pilots that would come forward and say that all the instruments said that the not only is it not curved, but it's also not spinning. Every military guy that I ever talked to said no matter what they're shooting, nobody accounts for the Coriolis effect, which is the spinning of the Earth, and so on and so on. Even the structural engineers, they or the surveyors that and I don't know how much you want me to go into this. The surveyors who say that, look, we treat the world, they tell you this. You can look this up in any dictionary. It's like, look up planar surveyor, Planar. The name gives it away. He goes, every project that we work on, treat the world like it's perfectly flat. But it can't be, right? Because we're told it's a globe. But everything we do in daily life in our 9-to-5 jobs, when it comes to these guys, it's flat. And so there's this weird paradox, which is only now seeming to break down. There you go. That's my rant.
Do you think, as far as with it being flat, is it just a disk that's floating in space, or is there anything underneath it? Or, you mentioned I noticed when doing the research, you mentioned the dome. How does that tie in?
No. It's totally cool. I know where you're going with this. Think of it like this. If you hear sirens, that's probably my ride.
Coming for you.
People say that all the time. It's like, oh man, you're gonna get picked up. It's like, you know what? I'm gonna keep talking until they do. All right. So think of it like this. You go into a planetarium, if you've ever been to one. Most of your major cities have them, but I know they're not in fashion like they used to be. And a planetarium is just kind of like a small sports stadium with a domed ceiling on it, which you project the stars and the planets and comets and all that other fun stuff. And then on the floor, the floor is perfectly flat for the most part, except for chairs you want to sit on. And my original argument was, because you're asking what it kind of looks like, it's kind of like that. As a matter of fact, I say to people, because I say, well, the Jupiter and Mars, they look spherical. So why aren't we spherical? I go, yeah, but if you're inside a planetarium, Jupiter looks spherical in there and Mars looks spherical in there as well. And they go, yeah, but we know it's fake because we're inside a planetarium. And I go, okay, you walk outside of that planetarium. How do you know you're not just in a bigger planetarium? That's what we're really talking about here. It doesn't have to be, I'll answer both your questions. First one is there space? Are we a disk with a dome floating in space? Don't know, because how do you know there's space to begin with? We see, something that's up in the sky, there's stars and stuff flying around there, right. But it was NASA and the space agencies that told us how far away they were and what they were. Mm-hmm. There doesn't have to be space. And in fact, in some cases, I try to say, it's like, look, if this thing is faking space like a planetarium, why would there have to be a whole solar system at all outside of it? We're so conditioned because we're told this at such a young age. Heck, we could be a little snow globe toy on somebody's desk.
That's right.
And
that's right.
No one would know any different. As far as how thick it is, that leads into a whole other thing, which I talked about in the clues, which was, we've only dug down, but again, the things that people don't know. The deepest hole ever drilled is 8 miles. That's it. Unless you're talking about military technology, and you will never know that. But your basic mining drilling companies, they have only dug down 8 miles. But yet, when you look in any science book, you can see an entire cross section of the entire world, which is supposedly 8,000 miles thick. So, and with bands of red and orange and yellow and white, and everything spinning. It's like, how do you know what's down there if you've only drilled down 8 miles? That's not even a tenth of a percent. It's 4,000 miles to the center, if that's what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And science will tell you in the books, it's like, well, we extrapolated, we're kind of, basically they have no idea.
Right.
what's down below 8 miles. They have no idea. But what they do know is that people hate question marks. So instead of opening up your science book with a cross section of the globe with a big question mark in the center of it, they just said, well, eventually it's like, okay, here's what we think it is. And then eventually you say, well, you know what? That's what it is.
Yes.
Because nobody's going to argue with it. So do I think it is a dome-like structure, Old Testament style, Genesis 1:6, the firmament, that separates the waters above and the waters below? Mm-hmm. Yes, I do. What the firmament is exactly made of, take your pick. Could be, electromagnetic, could be force field, could be harmonics, could be a heavy element, could be a heavy water for all I know. In fact, some people are leaning that way recently because all the weird kind of water shimmering stuff we're seeing lately that we didn't notice before. And then what's below this? I still do believe that below the magma system that's in this world, I do believe there are other civilizations. No question. I don't think they're alien. I think they are older, previous versions of us. I go so far as to say that, look, I don't think we're the first people to rent this apartment by any stretch. Mm-hmm. We may be version 7. And I think some of the biblical stuff even ties in with that. So who was version 1? What did the earlier versions look like? You remember, it depends on, and I'm not going to single out any one religion, but all sorts of different religions talk about that, there was a time when there was no moon, that there was a time when there was, that there was just light, various shades of light, and there was no sun. That the continents were all grouped together in a supercontinent called Pangea. That's kind of, I know I'm kind of a little all over the place with that.
No, it's okay. It's okay, Mark. This is great information. I wanted to ask you, you said, it would seem like we're in a planetarium. So what are we actually looking at when we're looking up and we see the stars and the moon, and what are we looking at?
I think when you're looking at the stars and the moon, I think that's exactly what you're looking at, is the inside of a planetarium, a giant. Now, of course, this one is far, far more advanced. So you're looking at objects that are basically a projection system, but they are very, very close.
Okay, so they're not solid.
They're not millions of light years away. They are probably barely even thousands of miles away. Mm-hmm. Could they be three-dimensional in nature? Yeah, maybe. The only thing that makes it a little different from a planetarium is I'm not convinced that the sun and the moon aren't three-dimensional objects that are kind of floating around us like a mobile over a child's crib. That makes it different from a planetarium. Planetarium, you go there and the moon is just, part of the system, part of the stars. Right. Everything else, like comets and everything, that's also, tied in with the stars. But I think with this thing, it had to be complex enough that the sun and the moon were their own entities, again, which is very interesting in itself, because and people they're trying to envision what that means is, I mean that the sun and the moon are probably roughly the same size, maybe 30 plus miles across, maybe several thousand miles high. Yeah, the sun gives off heat, but not enough heat on its own to do all the temperature changes of the Earth. And the moon does not reflect anything of the sun. The moon is its own self-illuminated object. And if you have any doubts on that, look up the temperature difference. Look up on YouTube or anything online that the moon actually generates a cold light. And people saying, what do you mean, it's colder at night? No, I don't mean it's colder at night. I mean the moon is actually generating some sort of light that acts as a refrigerant. So if you're having a hard time envisioning that, I mean, it's the opposite of what you see in the sun. So if you're out in the desert, it's 90 degrees in the sunlight and it's 80 degrees in the shade, because, the shade is blocking some of the sun. But if you're in the moonlight, it's the exact opposite. And that is, let's say it's 50 degrees in the moonlight. You go into the moon shade, it's 60 degrees. It's warmer. And it gets even weirder than that, because I was the first one to suggest this. I say, what happens if you take a magnifying glass? You know what happens, magnifying glass of the sun, you can burn paper. What happens if you magnify moonlight and it actually gets colder? It's the weirdest thing. And you're thinking, well, does that prove a flat Earth? No, it doesn't prove a flat Earth, but it does absolutely change the relationship of the sun and the moon, what we've been told over all these years.
You know what? I wanted to ask you about, okay, let me just go back to what you just said about the moon and things like that. So I have seen some videos about the lunar wave and things, how fascinating that is. So are you saying that the moon itself is not a solid object?
I actually like it as a solid object. There's some people that said it's two-dimensional in nature, and other people said it's three-dimensional in nature. I still think it's a solid object because it's generating its own light source. I just like the feel of it as a. If I was going to build this place, I would make the moon a solid object. Is it completely three-dimensional? It's hard to say, but I can tell you that whatever it's displaying is. It's an artificial display system on its own. So, because people will say, I know there's tons of questions that come up with this. If I ever do public speaking things, I'm going to have to just give the audience give a microphone to the audience on a regular basis because people are going to have questions. But because people say, well, what about blood moons? What about crescent moons? What about all the phases of the moon? And I go, you're absolutely right. But how hard is that? Because if the moon is projecting, what it appears to be is the moon, it may be a three-dimensional object, right? But what it's displaying on its surface is artificial. So if it and that makes sense because, if there is no Earth between the sun and the moon, then a blood moon, shading it red, it's got to be artificial. The crescents, the waxing and waning, that's got to be artificial. And it's the generating of the cold light, also artificial. But do I think it's a three-dimensional object? Yeah, I do. I really, really do.
All right, this is so interesting. We're going to have some more questions from Mark. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. We got Mark Sargent, and this flat Earth thing I really love. I really do. And you've told us so much. You've told us so much. I'm serious. I wanted to ask you specifically, who owns Antarctica?
No one. Excellent question. Nobody owns Antarctica, and that alone should raise a few eyebrows. So not only, as I mentioned earlier, not only is no corporation, no matter how much money you have, and honestly, money and power and greed, they run this world. So how can you tell me they can't get in there?
Right.
But moreover than that, find me a piece of property anywhere outside of Antarctica that isn't owned by someone. It's impossible. Everybody owns something, whether it's a government state park or an individual thing or a corporate thing. Everybody owns everything. Real estate is is a huge commodity in this world, and everything is marked off. But in Antarctica, it was broken up into sections. Now there are people that lay claim to slivers of the territory, like tiny slivers of a big pie, but nobody actually owns Antarctica. And the other thing about that is that it's a unilateral treaty. Here's the other thing. It's like, look, there's been rivalries and treaties that have been broken constantly. That's what treaties are for. We hear about broken treaties, all throughout history. So tell me why, if Antarctica is just chock full of resources, why this treaty is still in place unilaterally. It's not just that the Russians and the Americans alone decided, that they were going to agree on this during the middle of supposedly the Cold War. How did that happen? When China became a massive economic power, they didn't try to muscle their way into Antarctica. All the countries that were trying to rebuild after World War II, why didn't they, want to lay claim? Tell me, no mining company, no petroleum company. If there's supposed uranium down there, no country that wanted to become, an atomic power down the road. They weren't going to get into this. It's bizarre. The only people that are down there are scientists in the military. You're not allowed to fly over it. The flights, even though airline flights that should be able to shortcut over the South Pole, no different than the North Pole. People fly, supposedly from, the Soviet Union Eastern Bloc over to our side quite often, but in the South Pole, they don't. They never do. And when you say it, if you look at the wiki entry, it's like, oh, it's too cold. It's like, what are you talking about, too cold? It's like you get up to 30,000 feet in the middle of Arizona and it's negative, it's below freezing. So what cold are you talking about? So yeah, it's ridiculous. Antarctica is this giant mystery, which is sealed off by a multinational navy. Nobody's getting, you can go there. Now that being said, people are going to go, oh no, I can totally book a trip to Antarctica. And yeah, fine. You want to spend the 12, 15 grand or whatever it costs. You can go to the peninsula. You can have your picture taken with penguins. That's fine. That's totally cool. You can go to Antarctica. In fact, if you pay enough money, you can have somebody guide you to what they say is the South Pole, the geographic South Pole. But you are not allowed free reign. They're not going to give you a helicopter or a plane or snowmobiles. They're not going to just let you just go around, which is why they won't let the corporations down there, because they can't leave this chance. This secret is bigger than money, which is what I mentioned in the clues. It's so big that even extreme wealth has no bearing on it. Because if you let an oil company, here's why. People want to say, why wouldn't you let a corporation down there? Let's say you have an oil company that's down there. Well, oil companies have deep pockets, which means lots of helicopters, lots of planes. You get one plane that strays off course, goes to a place it shouldn't be, and either gets in a horrible accident or sees what it shouldn't. Well, you've got to take care of that plane. And you can only do that so many times before you have problems. No different than why up until very, very recently were there no private space programs. Everything was government sanctioned, and that's because you have to control the sky. You have to control what goes on up there, and they've done a really great job over the last 60 years. But unfortunately, the detection ability of the internet, coupled with a whole bunch of people that they're doing a lot of YouTube research rather than watching television, and here's where we are.
I was going to ask, Mark, what is the significance of Antarctica? Like, what if they're keeping people out? What's the reason?
The reason is because Antarctica. Excellent question, by the way. Antarctica. I wish more people had asked that one. Antarctica is significant because it's the only continent on the map of the flat Earth map that doesn't make sense. It's the only one that doesn't look anything like. So if you compare like a globe map to a flat Earth map, if you want to know what that looks like, you either can look at the UN flag or you can look up the, and I'm going to spell it for you, the azimuthal, that's AZIMUTHLAL, equidistant, EQI distant map. And the every other country on there, Australia and South America and Africa and North America and Asia, and all, they all look pretty much the same. But Antarctica on a globe looks like a continent. Looks like an Australian size continent. Just all white with ice, and it's about that big. But on a flat Earth map, it doesn't. Antarctica is actually not a continent at all. It is just this giant endless field of ice which stretches around the entire outer edge like the edge of a dinner plate. And outside of that is some sort of barrier that you are not allowed to go past. And and to show you the distance between the coastline of Antarctica and wherever this barrier is has got to be several thousand miles. Because Admiral Byrd, who, granted he was flying propeller planes, but they were getting better and better every year back then. He was looking for it for almost 30 years and did not find it up until 1955, 1956. And then it's like, oh, okay. But that's the significance of Antarctica. Antarctica is, for lack of a better word, the edge. On at least the outer part of Antarctica, but the coastline would be much, much more. It had to be sealed off. Again, I put this to myself when I was looking at this thing. I said, if I had to hide the world, then how would I hide it? You know, how could you hide it? And the first thing you've got to do, the first two things you have to do is you have to hide the outer edge and you have to hide the upper edge. And those two things were hidden almost simultaneously. And if either one of them had been done, you know, with years apart from each other, I would have said, yeah, okay, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, maybe. But in this case, it wasn't. Antarctica was sealed off in 1959, and the Van Allen radiation belt was announced in 1959. The Van Allen belt says, okay, don't go up to the top because it's super deadly. You don't ever want to go up there. It's basically a scare tactic. And the outer edge, the Antarctica, was done very, very quietly. It was like, oh yeah, by the way, in every country, let's say you come up with a brand new country called, let's call it Mysteria tomorrow, right? And Mysteria becomes an economic power. You are basically handed the Antarctic Treaty in front of you and say, you have to sign this. And you say, well, what am I signing? So yeah, by the way, you none of your companies can ever go to Antarctica. You say, how long? They go ever, ever. And then you say, oh, that's ridiculous. But then you sign it and you go away. So that's the significance of Antarctica.
Another question I had was, who do you think made this?
We going into the big question, which is who built the world we live in?
Yeah, who did it? Who did it?
It wasn't us. I know that. This thing is very, very old and very, very complex. There's only two answers to that, and I kind of joke about it when I say it, but it'll give you a kind of a decent perspective, which is it was either built by God or God subcontracted out the work. Meaning, and then you're kind of splitting hairs on because let's say a giant spaceship shows up tomorrow, you know, big golden spaceship shows up with advanced technology and they land, you know, wherever on the ice, and big press conference. They say, we built the structure you're living in now, and it's not a globe after all. There's a bunch of people that say, oh yeah, well, they're aliens, they're advanced race, and you know, obviously have the technology to build it. But there's another group of people that would say, well, you know, is this the divine? Is this, can you remember 80% of the world that 80% of the people around you belong to some sort of religious faction in one way or another. And by that, I mean the big five, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity. Yeah. So all those groups are going to say the same thing. And that is, if it was built, then it was created. If it was created as a creator, and there's the handprint of God right there. And, you know, then it gets kind of dicey after that, because now, do I think it's divine? Yes, I do. I think it was built by God. But then again, was it, or is it just another layer before you get to what we call God? And I don't want to get it too metaphysical here, but that's what we're really looking at. Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, you could have a giant golden spaceship show up and they could take credit for it. And who would argue with them? To be honest, they'd say, oh, yeah, by the way, to prove it, we'll do some signs and wonders. We'll make the moon green. And, you know, the moon's green for an hour. It's like, oh, they seem pretty legit. So, that's where we are. But whoever built it, we had nothing to do with it. It was built by someone very, very advanced. And we're talking about, remember, we can build similar things now, but on a much, much smaller scale, which is why it's easy for me to believe that this is just a bigger version of what we would do. You know, life imitates life and art imitates art, and so on and so on. The Truman Show, the Jim Carrey movie from 1998, was very feasible, in my opinion. Yeah, it cost a huge amount of upfront money, which we never get for a simple reality show. But back in 98, before there really were many reality shows, it was an interesting concept. You know, you build a structure, a Hollywood soundstage, 20 miles wide and, I don't know, several miles high. So, you know, if you scale that thing up, you know, it just takes more money and more resources and a better technology. That's it. And that's where I think we are.
Yeah. Mark, I wanted to ask you, so, okay, we living on a flat plane. So isn't it, okay, when I think about flying from east to west, north to south, at some point you would have to reach the edge. Is that how, okay, so is that possible? I mean, if we fly as far as we can east, where will we go?
Good one. If you fly, it doesn't really matter because there is no north, south, east, or west technically in this thing. In fact, we're having to redefine terms in the community because there is none. You know, if it's a flat plane where you really just have the center, you know, the inner circle and the outer circle, and the center of the map is the North Pole, which is magnetic north. So before GPS, if you're going to fly totally east and totally west, you would never make it because you'd always go by your compass, and your compass would lead you in this giant circle, like running your finger around the outer edge of a dinner plate or the inner edge of the dinner plate, because the compass is still, it points north, but north, as you know, it isn't north. It's the inner part of the map. Now, nowadays, you'd have to rely on the GPS system. And the GPS system, which was built by the United States Department of Defense back in the 90s, the GPS system, unfortunately, works. It's part of this, which is it works to try to hide this. Yeah, the GPS system is convenient and can tell you where you are and given any given day. But on a macro scale, when you're flying out to certain areas, you're never going to be allowed to go that far. The GPS system will steer you away from the ultimate edge. Now, if you could, I know where you're going with this. Hypothetically, if you could ignore the GPS system and if you had line of sight and just flew as far as you could, eventually, yes. If you had the fuel, I think you would finally reach something that looked like the edge. Now, what would happen when you got there? Well, it's anybody's guess. Could it be a soft barrier or a hard barrier? Would you just start slowing down more and more until eventually, there'd be this pushback of G-forces and you have to turn around like we do in simulations now? Maybe. But in order to do what you're thinking of doing, you're going to have to ignore every other system in your plane. And that's tough to do because if you're going just off visual, it's a tough thing, especially when you're flying over a continent with no landmarks. Right. It's a high probability you're going to get snow blind before you get anywhere near that edge.
Mark, explain the rotation of the sun for me. If it's on this flat Earth, tell me how that would work.
It looks like, and it's also tied in with the moon. So if you're talking about how the sun travels around this thing, and there are models out there, you can look it up on my site, and there's other people that have built it. It's kind of like if you took the, I imagine you guys are familiar with like the yin yang symbol.
Yes.
So if you take the yin yang symbol, which is really, really interesting, and you lay it on top of a flat Earth map, it matches up pretty much perfectly. Which is interesting because, the yin yang symbol is kind of like, the ebbing light and light and dark forces. But it also seems to work really, really well when it comes to the sun and the moon. Now, people have been working on the sun and the moon models a lot over the last 18 months. But the sun in this case, because the question does come up, and hopefully I can jump ahead before you ask it, or maybe you won't, which is, how can there even be time zones if the sun is just flying over the Earth instead of us revolving around it? Wouldn't the sun be visible from all points at once, and wouldn't it all be light or all be dark? And I say, yeah, but you got to remember, that's only if you're looking at the sun how it exists now, that it's hundreds of thousands of miles across and 93 million miles away. If the sun is actually only 30 something miles across and only a couple thousand miles up, and it's, and you got to remember, you also got to take apart the, it's not an omnidirectional light source like a light bulb that's hanging up in a scene. It's more like a spotlight where it's generating light, but that light has it's not infinite or seemingly infinite like an actual sun. So and it's tough to describe over the radio. But if you look at the model, because we actually have physical models, not just computer simulations, physical models. I've got one upstairs in the place here, where when it's shining down like a spotlight, as it's going around, places get lighter and darker, but it doesn't light up everything at once. It's got a limit to what it can shine on, and it works very, very well. Let me throw in another perspective for you, which is it comes down to, because people say, well, science say, well, no, it's got to be hundreds of thousands of miles across and 93 million miles away. I go, take a pen, any pen, and hold it up to your eye, right? Is the pen really, really huge, or is it just close to your eye? And you're thinking, well, your brain can function well because it's a pen, how big a pen is, and you can decipher that, right? But if you do the same thing with a ball of any sort of size, if you don't know how big that ball is, human beings are really, really bad at this, and there are university studies to back it up. We are really bad at determining perspective and movement and anything regarding that. And so it's almost like we were designed to be fooled for the illusion. I'll throw one more thing at you to kind of prove my point, which was a later clue I did way after the main clues, which went into perspective. And that was, if you've ever been in, where are you guys from right now? What city?
Knoxville, Tennessee.
Perfect. Okay. If you've ever been in stop and go traffic, if you've ever zoned out, you're stop and go traffic, you've zoned out for whatever, you're listening to the radio, who knows. And then all of a sudden the car next to you is either moving forwards or backwards, and you're not sure if you let your foot off the brake or not. You don't know if you are moving or the car next to you is moving. And you freak out for a second. It's like, oh, yeah, everything's fine, right? That's a human weakness, and it's everybody. It's not just you, it's everybody. They did a test with this with fake wooden cars. So they either move the car very, very slowly, or they move the wall in front of them or an object in front of them. No one could determine if they were moving or not. So when it comes to things that are moving in the sky, because that's really what a lot of this boils down to, is the sun moving through the sky, or are we moving through the sky? And science will say, well, they built this big model, but I go so far as to say, look, we can't even tell if our own car is moving, if it's going slow enough. So how can you prove that the sun is moving in the sky? And that's where things start to break down.
I'm curious, how does this affect astrology? And does it invalidate what we know about it now? Or
excellent question. I wish more people. You guys got good questions. The astrology, it does not really change anything with astrology. In fact, I've got some good friends that are into astrology. In fact, I just had a reading done on me recently. It's like 160 pages long. And it does. Here's all it does. Because several people have emailed me and said, aren't you killing astrology with this? And I go, no, I'm not trying to kill astrology. As a matter of fact, it makes astrology more relevant, because what you're talking about now, these objects and constellations and everything in the houses and all the other stuff that's tied to it, they aren't incredible distances away anymore. You got to remember that light apparently moves so fast that the only way that human beings can even understand it is if you boil it down to how light travels, per second. That's the lowest thing, and even per second is 186,000 miles a second. Let me do a quick math for you. That's 720 million miles an hour, right? Mm-hmm. And then multiply that by years. And it's numbers that are just beyond. You don't even have vocabulary for numbers like that. It's just something to the nth. And so what this does is it brings astrology all the way back, and it becomes far, far more intimate. Does it disregard anything in astrology? No, it just means that these things that everyone was talking about, all the stars and all the constellations, are much, much closer. They're much more intimate, and they're yours and yours alone. It's not the universe's, it's just yours. Mm-hmm. So I absolutely don't think that astrology should be diminished in any way, shape, or form. In fact, as this thing progresses, I think it's just going to be nothing but magnified.
Mark, I have actually heard you talk on another show about NASA being caught in different things, just people really scrutinizing their videos, things like that, that just don't add up. I wanted to ask you about if someone comes to you and says, okay, I know the Earth is round because NASA puts out very beautiful pictures of a round Earth. What would you tell them?
Yeah. No, that's fine. That's fine. No, I've heard it. It's like, okay, fine. And I've been waiting to just tee off some scientist about this, because I was the guy that looked for these pictures. In fact, I was looking at them way before I even knew what flat Earth was. I'll give you a perfect example, which was, because this was literally right in front of my face 15 years ago when I was running a tech support department at this company. And I thought it'd be kind of iconic to put different pictures of the globe on all these different monitors, that we were using. Well, here's the thing. When I started looking for us, and this was back in 2000, the internet wasn't that far along, but it was enough to where you should be able to find some stuff. And I did a search for Earth from space, or Earth in space, or the globe in space. I wasn't super great at Boolean strings at the time, but I knew enough to get by. And no matter what I typed in, I only saw one picture. Exactly one. And then we all know what it is. It's the Apollo 17 shot showing the bottom part of Africa and all of Antarctica. No accident that's what they showed, but you got to wonder, if it's the American space program, why didn't they show the United States? I would have gone way out of the way to get a picture of the United States via the American space program. Instead, you show Africa and Antarctica, where no one was in, back then. So I was looking for this and I couldn't find any photos. And then I started realizing once I started looking into 2014, that there were no photos. There was literally no photos out there. In fact, the guy that did, the first iPhone that came out, and you can look this up, this is public, there's articles about it. There were no photos to the point where, because the first iPhone also wanted to do what I wanted to do, which was put an iconic picture of the globe, and they had to manufacture it from scratch. They had to create a composite image, with Photoshop, and they hired a NASA consultant to do it. And he even admits, he goes, oh yeah, it was totally photoshopped, because, he didn't explain why there were no pictures or anything. And every picture that you see from NASA, I mean, I could tear apart NASA for the next week if you had the time, but every picture that you see from NASA is a composite image, with the exception of what they claim they released in the middle of last year. And I tried, what I do is, for me, it's a too little too late scenario. I call it the angry wife syndrome. They'll go, what are you talking about, angry wife syndrome? I go, okay. Guy comes home, married to a woman for 40 years, and wife's waiting for him and says, I'm divorcing you. And he goes, why? And she goes, because in the 40 years of marriage, you only brought me one bouquet of flowers. So what do you think happens the next day? He comes home from work and he's got a bouquet of flowers in his hands. And he goes, hey, I can save the marriage now, right? And she's going, what are you talking about? She goes, well, you should have done this years ago. Too little, too late. And that's really what we're talking about here with NASA. They went 43 years. That's 2 generations of people where no pictures of the Earth from space, no movies of the Earth rotating on its axis, no astronauts panning shots. We don't even have a shot. No movies of any object ever leaving the Earth's orbit or returning from returning to the Earth. And there are plenty of objects that should have done this by now. We don't even have a simple movie of an astronaut in a capsule or whatever it is, putting on his suit, opening up the airlock and leaving, and the camera following him. There are no movies along these lines. And we knew we were getting to them, because when we were saying there's no pictures of the Earth rotating from space and there's nothing, and the weather patterns don't morph, in the summer of last year, they released exactly 2 composite, movies. One was supposedly the Earth rotating on its axis, although the weather wasn't morphing over a period of 5-6 hours at all. And the other one was a geosynchronous orbit where the weather was morphing, but the Earth wasn't rotating. It's like, okay, so apparently you guys don't have the ability to fake both, because it's too complex. You need a supercomputer, and you don't either have the time or the money. But oh yeah, the Earth photos, that's just one of many things. Yeah, you want to have some fun, yeah, look up the Earth from space and look at all the photos, and tell me the ones that's real. There's only one they've ever really claimed that was real, and that was from 1972.
Wow. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Mark, I have a couple more questions for you before we wrap it up. Sure. Can we escape out of this dome? No. I mean, can we get out of it?
No, I don't think we can. I don't think that was ever the intention. And if we could, we would have done it by now. And there would be, because several people have said, well, aren't there other worlds? Now, do I think this is the only version of this? No, I do not. Is this the only snow globe on the table? Nope. I think that there are multiples, and in different stages. However, if we had the ability to go from one to another or get out of this place, you'd see a lot more people, and by that I mean elite people, super rich people disappearing. All of a sudden one day you'd see like a yacht go down, and it's like, oh yeah, heads of these companies and royals from these families, they would just disappear. You'd see a lot more mysterious high-level deaths if that was the case, and that isn't happening. But I do not think you wouldn't build a place like this with the safeguards involved in the complexity and allow people to leave. And I'll even throw one more out at you, which is, if atomic weapons in the megaton range can't breach this thing, then you're going to have to rely on other technology. Now, that could be what they're working on right now. And I know I don't have too much more time, but it's something like this. Imagine, maybe it is a jailbreak scenario where we're trying to find our way out. So atomic weapons don't work. So what else you got? Well, we got this HARP technology, frequency-based. Maybe we can do something there. That didn't work out too well, but wow, it can alter the weather pretty good. Let's use that. Okay, keep that line around. What else you got? Well, we got this CERN thing, that super collider, might be able to open up a doorway. Maybe we don't have to punch through the thing at all. Maybe we can just beam out, or find a back door. Maybe, although it seems to, it may have side effects. Well, what? I don't know. The Mandela effect may be a side effect of that. You don't know. But objectively, no, I don't think we can get out. And I don't think a system like this would ever allow us to get out.
Mark, why is it so important to keep it a secret?
It's important because as human beings, and I touched on this in the clues, we have a real hard time with confinement, which is why jails are something that most people avoid. And by that, I mean every other species on this planet, and I use that term lightly, we'll call it a plane, every other species in this place has no problem being confined as long as it's comfortable. Meaning you can create a wildlife preserve 100 miles wide and all the moose and buffalo and antelope and whatever else you want to put in there, they're going to react just fine, right? You put human beings in that same wildlife preserve and they're going to act really different, because all they're going to care about is the fence. They're going to look at the fence. They're just going to ask questions. Who built the fence? Why is the fence there? Did we do something wrong? Should we pay homage to the fence? Should we have rituals regarding the fence? Should we build churches around the concept of the fence? That's all we care about. And so the way, and we basically, what I'm saying is we wouldn't act naturally.
Right.
So in order to keep that a secret, imagine if you're the powers that be, and I'll give you this is not a doom and gloom thing. It's just kind of, you're like, why? Okay, why? If you're the powers that be, you're the authority, the super rich, the governments, the royals, whoever, whatever secret society you want to take your pick. If you want your power structure to remain somewhat the same, you have to hide this. Here's why. The fence is discovered tomorrow. Somebody announces tomorrow that there's a barrier on the outside of Antarctica and the world isn't what you think it is. It's a dome-like structure. Immediately, every astrophysics and astronomy program, not astrology, astronomy program in every school and every university, they don't open their doors tomorrow. Those programs are gone. Every other science organization, geology, hydrology, archaeology, biology, take your pick, anything is in zoology, they have to rebuild and retool. Your textbooks just get thrown out and rebuilt from the ground up. Militaries, if you're going to war with, if you're already at war, shells to someone on the other side of a hill, do you keep firing those shells? Because now you're all in the same boat. And if there's a creator, that means somebody's probably all, looking over your shoulder. Do you keep going to war? That changes everything economically. Yeah. And we're talking about massive defense departments all over the place. And then last but not least, it's the spiritual change, which is every religion in the world that's been looking for their proof of intelligent design, and for lack of a better term, they get it. They don't, they immediately find their proof of God. And that's where the biggest responsibility comes in, which is why I put that warning out to religions. I said, because we got to remember, science has been beating back religion with a club for the last 500 years, building what really was their own pseudo-religion. Mm-hmm. And now they would have to come back and say, oh yeah, our biggest thing we were absolutely wrong about. And turns out that, and so then you got some really big questions. Think if you're the general population. The population would go, okay, science was wrong about this, and this was a big one. What else are you guys wrong about, right? And everything comes into question. Two, hey, religion seemed to be right about this. What else is religion right about? And then last but not least comes in the suspicion factor, which is somebody lied about this. Somebody's been keeping this a secret, and they've been keeping this a secret. What other secrets are there? Mm-hmm. And every other secret that's been dismissed over the last, 100 years, at the very least, take your pick, World Trade Center, JFK, Pearl Harbor, every American war, little things like, Sandy Hook and the Boston Bombing, take your pick. Anything that's been on the news that's been discovered as or discussed as a conspiracy, those all come back on the table immediately. You take them back out of the box, you slap them on the table, because everything is fair game now.
Yeah.
And all those things I just listed, that all happens in like a month. And can you imagine the chaos that could potentially ensue. I mean, yeah, it could still turn in. I still consider it possibly a new golden age if it's handled right. But if it's handled wrong, buyer beware.
Wow, that's amazing. And bottom line is, they're not going to relinquish power to the churches. And science would take a beating,
willingly.
Basically.
Not willingly, they're not.
Yeah. And science would take a beating. All right.
Neil deGrasse Tyson would have to hide in his house with the drapes pulled for a long, long time.
Mark, this has been amazing. I hope that we can get you to come back on the show again. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Oh, no, thank you very much for having me. It's been an utter pleasure. And you guys, thank you for asking great questions.
Hey, do you want to take a moment to tell our listeners where they can find your work and your videos and things like that?
Sure. The free website is enclosedworld.com. The subscription site is marksargent.com. I've got a book on Amazon called Flat Earth Clues. It's also an Audible book. The free apps for Apple and Android are just, Flat Earth Clues. And of course, you can just go into YouTube or any search engine and type in Flat Earth Clues, and you'll find all my stuff.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Guys, we are going to be having another show coming out for you in the next few weeks. I will have that up on our website. We want to give thanks to Mark Sargent. See you guys next time.